Or episode 615 coming your way. We're talking about today problems with injectable Superdrol and Equipoise dose. Now, what we're going to do in this one is we're going to focus on two different posts on the forum, and we're going to talk about what the guys are doing right and what they're doing wrong and where they could have improved because they had a couple different situations on these logs, not on these logs, but on these posts. And in these situations, we're going to see what they could have done better so you don't repeat the same mistake. So let's start with the first one. So this was posted by Return of the Meathead, and he's been taking steroids for about 10 years, almost 10 years, and he's never taken Superdrol until he started taking it back in October. He did 12 and a half milligrams of the injectable version. He says this has to be the most powerful shit on the market, but also the most dangerous. You can legit feel the toxicity. I can't think of a stronger pre-workout though. Just insane strength boost. Has to be stronger than Anadrol, Halo, D-Bol, etc. In my opinion. Thoughts on this steroid? Thanks. And he talks about it. So look, I used Superdrol. See, back in the day, I'd say 15 years ago, Mobster, 12, 15 years ago in the United States,
Yeah.
you could go online and you could buy a Superdrol clone
Mm.
products, several different products. They were selling on eBay. I think they were even selling on Amazon. They were, on websites online, on supplement websites, the same supplement websites that were selling you protein powder or creatine and multivitamins and support supplements were also selling designer steroid Superdrol clones. So you could literally go online at 16, 17 years old if you had a credit card and order Superdrol online with a credit card and have it delivered to your house legally. So this was insane. And a lot of people were using these products, these Superdrol clones, and they were getting experience using them. And I could tell you I was one of them. I was one of them because at the time I was repping for a supplement company that had one of these supplement clones being sold on their website. So I actually had firsthand experience using this, and I'd get bottles for free, right? So I tried this stuff. I was like, man, this stuff, if you run Superdrol at 10 milligrams and you increase it to 20 milligrams, you feel it. You feel it. Even a 5 milligram difference, you feel. 30 milligrams, ooh, you feel that big time. 40 milligrams, it's like you're dying. Okay. I was like, fuck, I can't handle it. So the longest I was able to even go on Superdrol was like 2 or 3 weeks before I had to stop. It just makes you feel like shit. It drains the life out of you. And you're pissing like brown urine. It is horrible what it does to
Yeah.
your body. So this stuff is really, and he said it himself, it's got to be the most toxic. So he's taken the injectable version. The injectable version is going to be even more pronounced. It's going to be absorbed fully in the system, and it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks pre-workout. So one of the things that I always recommend to people, if you do want to experiment with Superdrol, is run it very low and run it for a short amount of time. You're not going to be able to run it more than 2 or 3 weeks because it's too damn toxic. But man, this stuff works. This stuff works. If you're like hit a plateau, I was at a plateau with strength. I can't remember what I was benching and what I was squatting at the time, but I had hit a plateau for like 3 months where I couldn't break through. I got on Superdrol and like literally 3 or 4 days later, Mobster, I like blew through my personal record. That's
Mm.
what it does. So it just adds insane amount of strength, but man, it makes you feel like you're dying on it because it just sucks the life out of you. You feel fatigue all day. You just, I mean, it is just nasty. It feels like basically you're sick. It's like you got the flu, you know? So go ahead.
Yeah. Look, there's a bunch of things that Steve and I are going to talk about in regards to this, but let me touch on one aspect right now, Steve. I've said that the most potent PEDs you take or can take, if you choose to do so, will have an impact on your body above and beyond the one that you want it to. So, for example, tren. We talk about this multiple times. For some people, tren is the PED of choice. Equally, We know the toxicity, the side effects, the effects that some people experience. Not every person, but I would argue, Steve, that of the negative side effects, the majority of people have at least one or two of the side effects, and specifically dose dependent. Once you get above 300 milligrams, Steve, I would argue that again, most people are going to have some sort of side effects, at least one. And I'm talking about the negative aspects. Um, so the drugs that are going to have the most potent anabolic or the most potent androgenic effects on your body will come with sides. So here's the thing. I've used for the day of a competition only check drops. I don't know how to pronounce this properly, Steve. Miralabone, I think is the proper the chemical name. The check drop is the name that everybody uses. 200 micrograms underneath the tongue, using an injectable form, which is 200 micrograms per milliliter underneath the tongue. The day of a competition is like having 8 hours of turbo power. Not when I'm walking around minding my own business between efforts, but when I was lifting the weights, specifically the maximal top two, top one, maximal single that I'm going to lift for the day. I'm going to have that sort of rah, come on, let's kick ass kind of attitude, and that worked for me. The problem you have here is that combination of red line in your body, in terms of your foot to the floor, the revving, so to speak, whatever you want to call it, and at the same time, almost ignoring the fact that the way that you feel is an indication that you're redlining the body. And as I said to Steve in the pre-show, and I'm going to touch on the pre-workout thought process in a moment, where do you go from here, Steve? What's the next most potent drug you can take? Let me go to the pre-workout thing, and I'll bring Steve back in for this. So Steve and I, for whatever reason, over the times of our lifting career, between the two of us, it's probably close to 65, 70 years. I've done 45 years, and I think Steve's 20 plus years in terms of how many years we've been training in the gym, working out with weights, etc. And for whatever reason, I've never really got into the whole pre-workout thing. Steve doesn't even do what I do, which is a strong cup of coffee before the gym. And here's the thing: we talk about, Steve and I, how adaptive the body is. I will have a really small bowl of cereal in the morning, Steve, cup of tea, my usual supplements or whatever else, and then I have a strong cup of coffee, and then I go to the gym. And you can come onto my log and see the stuff I've done. I've trained that way for decades, Steve. And I think maybe on a day of a competition with a little pre-competition nerves, I would get up and have a little like scrambled eggs on toast on the day of a competition, in addition to what I would normally do. Go back to bed and then get up and have a normal breakfast, and then go and kill it in the gym on a cup of coffee. Or as I say, when I was at my absolute best on the day of competition, check drops under the tongue, just on that day, because I wanted to take my body to another place on that day. The idea and pre-workouts as supplements, never mind pro hormones or pseudo pro hormones, because Superdrol is definitely a steroid. The idea that you're using arguably the most toxic steroid, or some ridiculously overdosed 400 milligram plus caffeine, loads of other stuff in it to boost the effects of caffeine, beta aniline to give you paraphasia, the tingling sensation, so you can feel it working. Steve, what happens next? Where do you go? Do you double the dose? Do you dry scoop it? Do you inject twice the dose to feel even more toxic? What's the next drug? Do you start sniffing coke before workouts? I don't get it, because there's an argument to be made even for this in this circumstance. I would save this for the very, very end of the strength cycle in terms of training and or a PED stack. I would probably only do this for one workout a week for the last 4 weeks if I was going to do something like this. And then, as I said, he himself says you can legit feel the toxicity. So it's almost that mental process, which I don't understand. And maybe it's a sign of my age, being a boomer or whatever else. I don't want to feel toxic. I want to feel strong as fuck. I want to feel full of energy. I don't mind feeling fatigued after the workout. That shows me I've had a great workout. I don't mind my muscles. If I'm a bodybuilder, I don't mind a targeted muscle. Let's say my chest, my pecs. Oh my God, Steve, what a chest workout that was. I'm still pumped an hour later. I can feel the muscle that has been stimulated all the way down to the bone. That's great. What I don't want to do is feel toxic. And I'll bring Steve in for this as well, because the argument becomes we talk about gut health issues, Steve and I, we talk about things you can do to improve, the inflammation in your body and so on and so forth. I want as best I possibly can to have the greatest anabolic muscle building, muscle cell splitting, muscle cells thickening response to the workout I've just done. I want the same thing for strength. I want to feel that I fatigue the muscle sufficiently that the muscle's going to go away, be stimulated to get stronger, so that when I come back to the next workout, I'm going to get 1, 2, 3 more reps than last time. What I don't want, as a means of making me stronger, bigger, more nasty, etc., getting leaner, whatever it is that you're targeting, I don't want to feel awful about it, Steve. I don't want to feel toxic. So, what do you think about this sort of pre-workout slash using strong drugs that make you feel horrible to have a good workout? That specific thing, and we'll talk about how we think perhaps you could have run or better utilize Superdrol in these circumstances in the safest way possible. Not completely safe, but the best we can do in the circumstances.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to spike your heart rate before a workout. That's the first thing I'll say. When during your workout, during a set, whether you're doing cardio or weight training or whatever, your heart rate is going to go up. There's going to be more blood being pumped. So artificially pumping it more is just going to wear you out. So this is why you feel like shit when you're on something like Superdose. This is why you feel like shit when you're on stimulants. You get maybe you feel that neurotransmitter flashing in your brain, but in the end, your energy is actually dwindling. So that's why you don't see runners before a race sipping coffee because it doesn't make any sense to rev up your heart rate or taking energy drinks. Stupid people do that, at races. Maybe like if it's their first time doing a race or something, they don't know any better, they'll do that. You don't want to have sugar before a race. Well, sugar, it's good energy. No, you don't want to have sugar before a race because now your body has to digest that during the run. Sometimes when they're doing a long run, they might have a sugar tab. They'll pop a sugar tab just to get some glycogen in their system. But you don't want to eat a meal before a run.
Steve,
So,
just to interrupt you, have you seen the memes when it's almost like a gym goer starter pack, and the meme always includes Monster, and it will always be the sugar version with, I believe,
yeah.
150
So,
plus milligrams of caffeine per drink. That's like almost a joke.
well, what happens is people get addicted to it, and then now you need it just to get in a workout. You're like, Steve, I can't go out without it. Well, because you're addicted to it. So you got to wean yourself back off of it. So it's good to not start getting it in the first place. So if you're addicted, really the best way to train is raw. You don't want anything in your system. That's the best way to train. So try and do it like that. But yeah, using steroids as pre-workouts and getting, it's not long-term practical regardless. So it'd be something you want to take before a competition, maybe to give you a little
Yes,
edge, but it's
or
not something.
maybe here's a thought process, right? Because we know that bodybuilding and for that
Yeah.
matter, strength training can be kind of extreme. So here's what I would do in these circumstances. As I just said, save it towards the end of a cycle. If you're a bodybuilder, perhaps coming up to a competition, you're super depleted, and just use the absolute minimum you can for the shortest period of time. Let's move on to the next one, Steve.
So this is one where there's a question about equipoise dosing protocol. So this guy says he's 5'10", 216. He's a moderate aromatizer, which means he, has some estrogen issues here and there. He's taken up to a gram of test before, never got any test flu, just had to up my AI a bit, which he's talking about aromatase inhibitor. He says he has experience with DECA. He started at 300 milligrams a week, increased it up to 600 with no sides. He also has experience with Tren. He started out at 225 milligrams a week and increased up to 525 milligrams with 700 milligrams mass and 400 milligrams test with little sides, except the occasional trend sweats, but nothing too severe. Says he has a pretty good tolerance for AAS, and now he says he wants to start an equipoise cycle for his next blast. He's thinking about 1,000 milligrams test, 800
Yeah,
milligrams equipoise,
yeah, yeah.
and if there's anything else, he should run alongside it. So,
Anything else, Steve? Look, right. Um, there's a sort of an analogy I see in bodybuilding and PEDU specifically quite often, and I actually kind of go against this a little tiny bit, right? So the analogy is thus: it seems to be the case that for, I would say, roughly 40%, that's how often it seems to occur. If you used X and let's say another product, so X and Y, and your total milligram intake was 800 milligrams, then the next stack, even if it's X and Y, these can be specific steroids that work for you. The next stack needs to be 100 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams. Why? If X and Y at 800 milligrams total worked, then do X and Y at 800 milligrams the next time you do it. Growth is gradual. You're not necessarily going to suddenly add 10 more pounds of muscle you did running it at 800 milligrams by running it at a gram. You're not necessarily going to suddenly get, 40, 50, 60 pounds on your bench press by adding another 200 milligrams total. And you don't have to try every steroid there is. So the same thing applies here, Steve. You do not need to go from, as he said, 1,000 milligrams here or doubling up on the trend or whatever else, just because you have been okay with it in the past. It seems to be there's a sort of psychological thing where some guys feel they need to double up, some guys feel they need to go from a gram to 1.5 grams. It works for some people, and you might have got lucky the last time. So my thought process would be, if the last cycle was incredibly effective, if you got all the results that you wanted, you lost weight, you got stronger, you was more muscular, you put a quarter of an inch on your arms, do the same goddamn cycle again. You do not need to go from a gram to 1.8 grams. And not only that, here's the thing. We see this an awful lot, Steve. And we talk about prototype stacks. People love to hear about prototype stacks. But what is your reason for doing a prototype stack and not competing in a Mr. Olympia? Do you need to spend $1,000 a month on 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams of testosterone or derivatives of testosterone or insulin and growth hormone? And you're not going to put yourself up against Samson Duelda and hopefully win $600,000, because you're not. You're just doing it for you. And that's the great and vast majority of our listeners. So the thought process shouldn't necessarily be, well, because I've managed to do okay on 600 or 700 milligrams before, this time I need to do 800 milligrams. It should just be, is what I'm doing sufficient to produce the result that I want? And if the last stack was sufficient and it was less, do the last stack again. Steve and I talk about linear progression as well. And the simple fact of the matter is, just because you might have gained, I don't know, Steve, 4 pounds of new muscle tissue on your last cycle, the likelihood of you gaining 4 pounds again is slim. It's probably going to be 3 pounds. But Steve and I have talked about linear progression. And the simple fact of the matter is, you won't gain, as Steve said it multiple times before. If it was 10 pounds every year and you did 10 years, that's 100 pounds. In 20 years, it'd be 200 pounds. It doesn't, your body doesn't work like that. And you can't force it by doubling up or tripling up. The only argument, perhaps, Steve, for the professional to be using what we consider to be excessive 5 grams, because we've talked about 5-gram cycles before, 5,000 milligrams of testosterone derivatives, androgenics, and anabolics, and a bunch of insulin growth hormone, is because it's literally their career. So they're paying the mortgage, it's how they become a professional, and so on and so forth. The great and vast majority of you guys are working Joes. So I want you to be healthy. I want you to get great results. I want you to I'd much rather you did shorter, more frequent cycles through the year than 20 weeks. And for the vast majority of you, getting close to, as is the circumstances here, nearly 2,000 milligrams a week for probably 2 or 3 more pounds of muscle tissue over and above the last cycle. It's a fantastic result, Steve, but 2 grams or very nearly 2 grams. What do you think about this sort of almost linear progression that some people feel they need to sort of take part in? Because again, he's handling this very well, but he might be 1 in 1,000 that could do this. Better you.
Look, at the end of the day, the problem is this isn't a black and white thing. It's gray. Like, it's going to be dependent on a lot of things. I mean, maybe his gear was underdosed. Maybe his genetics aren't that good. Maybe his training isn't where it needs to be. Maybe his diet isn't where it needs to be. Maybe his sleep isn't where it needs to be. Maybe he has a history of being exposed to chemicals, growing up near a coal mine or a polluted river or something like that. I mean, who knows? Could be a lot of different factors. I knew a kid growing up. He grew up near Chernobyl, maybe 150 miles away. Um, and we used to work out together, and we worked out the whole summer together. Same workouts, pretty much the same diet, pretty much the same everything. And he just couldn't make any progression, but I was making amazing progression. So there's lots of factors, some beyond our control. But I think with him, it's very, very important when it comes to equipoise to understand the way equipoise works. And you said it a couple times, Mobster. It's a testosterone derivative. And so you basically take the testosterone molecule, take the male hormone testosterone, and you play
Mm.
around with it. And you make it into something that's less androgenic and less estrogenic. So you get a more mild option. So the idea behind equipoise is you can jack up the dose, but at the same time, I think the mistake here, it's not as much as he wants to run all this EQ, which 800 milligrams, okay, you want to run 800 milligrams, but stacking 1,000 milligrams of testosterone with it doesn't make any
Yes.
sense because the whole reason you run the EQ at a high dose, the same reason you run something like DECA at a high dose, is so you don't get the side effects associated with testosterone. But if you're running all that testosterone with it, it doesn't make any sense. It's like taking a glass, you've got glasses on a table. One is lemonade and one is water, and the water is the testosterone, and the lemonade was what was tinkered with. It's water, but it was also tinkered with to turn it into
Yeah. Yeah.
lemonade.
Yeah.
And then you want to mix in the water on top of the lemonade. It doesn't make any sense. So if you want to drink the lemonade by itself. There's no need to mix in more water with it. You're kind of defeating the purpose of ordering the lemonade to begin with. The water is free, and the lemonade costs $5, and then you want to take the water and dump it on top of the lemonade to dilute it. It doesn't make any sense. So for me, it would have made more sense here for him to run testosterone at 200 milligrams and then go ahead and run the equipoise high. This way you get the benefits of the equipoise in the first place. If you don't want to do that, then there's no point of even running the equipoise. Just run 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and call it a day. You get a ton of androgenic and estrogenic side effects. So you get
Here's the thing as well, Steve. He talks about the logic is that he's run 1,000 milligram test deca with no sides and 1,500 milligrams test tren and mastron with no sides. It doesn't mean he won't get no sides with EQ. I'll give you an example. We see these with guys that very rarely use, or if at all, an AI with their cycle because of the cycle that I run before. I didn't use an AI. I got great results. This cycle I've just run, I didn't use an AI. I got great results. And we know because it's very rarely the same cycle. The next time they run a cycle, it's slightly elevated amounts of whatever PED of choice has gone in, and all of a sudden they hit a problem that requires an AI, and they haven't got it on hand because they never used it before, never had a problem. So you can't rely on your body responding in exactly the same way that it did with other drugs to EQ. You can't rely on the fact that you was using 1,000 milligrams test deca or 1,500 milligrams test mast, and then still have the same great response running EQ and test because you're using a different PED. Arguably, we would actually suggest perhaps he does use EQ, but at a much lower dosage because, as Steve and I said on a podcast before, we can always go to a higher dose as the cycle progresses or in the next cycle. There's no need. Let's talk about now, Steve, the importance of having a trainer login and get in this example where we was able to help.
Yeah, and in both instances, if they had a log, they would have been able to, kind of get help in the first place and avoid some of these mistakes that people are making. And, you're making mistakes hitting your pocketbook, you're making mistakes hitting your health, you're making different types of mistakes that are unnecessary. So a log is a great way to come on the forum and tell us about yourself so we can get to know you. And then as the log progresses, we get to know you as a person, and we get to know what you're looking for and your goals and your wants and everything else in between. And this way, it kind of helps us play around with everything that you're doing when it comes to your training, your diet, steroids you're using, supplements you're using, all this other stuff. and we can kind of identify your weaknesses. Some people, we know them well, Mobster. Some people on the
Yeah,
forum, they have problems because they have a huge family. They have a hard
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Some people have a hard time with sleep. Some people have a hard time with diet. Some people have a hard time with food prep. So we get to know you, and then we can kind of hammer away at your weaknesses and improve on your strengths. And that's important for doing a log. And it's a great way for you, rather than coming on the forum and posting a bunch of threads asking questions, you can just stick to the log and ask questions on the log. But because we have a reference point where we're getting to know you, we'll know you well enough where we can really, really help you beyond anything that anyone else will be able to help you.
There was someone on the forum, Steve, that's got the same sort of background that you have, a big family, like you said, or a working Joe doing construction, or they've similar PD experience to you. And that's the great thing about the forums and having a log. Someone who's almost the same as you, even something that occurred to me as you were talking, Steve, is we can talk your language. There will be someone on the forum who understands where you're coming from, and you'll almost tune into them and talk your language. I don't always do that. There are others that do. And we both give exactly the same response, but the other person says it in a way that the member kind of feels this guy knows what I'm talking about. I give them the same answers, give them the same lower dosage, the same training tweak, but the other person spoke to them in a way that they kind of tuned into this guy knows what I've done. He's got my experience. I'm going to listen to him. Same answer, better way. It's because we have that variety of people that are looking to help you. And that's a good thing as well, Steve. When sometimes you can feel like you're doing this shit on your own. You talk to people in the gym, you've done a little bit of research, but having 20, 30, 40 people regularly giving you input makes you feel like you've got half a dozen people that got your back, that get what you're doing, that same kind of experience, the same kind of time under the bar, all that kind of jazzy stuff, Steve. And that's where these kind of things come in. And then you almost get to the point where you don't want to let these guys down. That's where the progress comes from. If I miss a training session, if I go out and get drunk, oh no, I've let the guys, I'm not doing that because there's 30 people out there, hundreds of thousands reading, but 30, 40 people out there that want me to succeed. They don't want me to get ill. They don't need me to take 800 milligrams and come on, motherfucker, double it up, go to 1600. No, they want me to take 300. They want me to get great results. They don't want me to need an AI this time and they didn't need it last time. Whatever. And they want to put on the same amount of muscle as you do. So they've got your back. And you go on their logs and see what they're doing and see how they're food prepping. I could do that. I could food prep like that. I could train like that. I can train at 3:30. Look at this guy. We had one the other day, Steve, trained at 3:30, 20 past 3 in the morning. That was the only time he was able to get to the gym. Crazy shit. I'd blown away. The earliest I've trained is like 7:30 in the morning just because it was busy. But the guys are out there. You can be a working Joe and still get to the gym in the morning. You could have had a 16-hour fast and still have a great workout. And you see other guys that are doing it. Well, why the fuck can't I do it? So that's the whole thing. And then you start to get into that. And like I said, there's always more on another cycle at some point in the future. So we don't need you. We don't want you to go crazy right now because you can always tweak it later on. You can always do something later on. Start low. Where'd you go from 800, Steve? You can't go backwards. It's all in you. So start at 300 milligrams, start at 400 milligrams, work your way up to the point where maybe at some point, 3, 4 cycles in the future, you might need, because you can start to look like you're going to compete, maybe then 800 milligrams. So it's all that kind of support stuff all the time. What else do you want to talk about, Steve, before we finish?
Yeah, that covers it. So come on the forum, do a log,
Yep,
and it's the best way. I mean, we're talking about it's free to do a log, and you're going to get great advice. So
yep.
I mean, I don't see. I
Hundreds of years of experience between us, Steve. Hundreds, if not, and thousands of years worth of training
Yeah,
between us as a group.
perfect.
Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours, is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. And podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.